Okay, so first of all, let's start with this .NET framework. Okay, so this .NET framework is actually a platform which is used to actually run different programming languages. You can say on a common build, or you can say on a common platform. So using this .NET framework, we can actually embed codes of different languages in a single project. For example, if we have language C sharp, C++, VB, F sharp, and so on. There are actually variety of languages present on this .NET framework. So if we go by 2018, there were actually 69 plus languages that were supported by this .NET framework. Uh, Not only this Windows form based, but actually this .NET framework supports a variety of languages nowadays, even PHP, JavaScript, ASP.NET, all these languages or actually work on this .NET framework. Okay, so the main feature of this .NET framework is that it provides interoperability to different languages. Okay, so by interoperability, what we mean is that uh, consider you have a project P1. Okay, so let us consider you have a project P1 and you are developing some application. Okay, so this might be, let us assume you are using language C sharp. Okay, and consider year back you developed another project P2. Okay, and this project was actually in some other language, for example VB. Okay, and in this project you actually had a module. Okay, so let us call that module M. Okay, and what you wanted was to use this module in your project P1. Okay, so this is possible even if this module is in some different language, that is Visual Basic, but because of this .NET framework you can use this module M in your project P1. Okay, which is actually being built using this C sharp language. So this is all possible because of this .NET framework. Okay, so one of the most advantageous feature of this .NET framework is interoperability. Okay, so we will go deep into this, what is this interoperability, while we will do different examples. Okay, so so these are some other features of our .NET framework. So actually this .NET framework provides an object-oriented programming environment. And not only this .NET framework provides this object-oriented programming environment to the code stored locally, but also to the code that might be stored on some web server and which is to be executed remotely. Okay, so this is one of the feature of this .NET framework. Okay, moreover this .NET framework minimizes software deployment and versioning conflicts. Okay, so how this minimizes software deployment and versioning conflicts, we will see about it in our coming lectures. Okay, so you might just keep this on back of your mind. Okay, and when we will reach that topic I will get hold of this whole concept and you will understand in better on that lecture. Okay, so next is actually this .NET framework provides a code execution environment and actually promotes safe execution of code. Safe in the sense whatever your code you are running, it is safe in the sense that no other application will interfere with this code, and we are saying in sense of security. Okay, so consider this is your RAM. Okay, so this is your RAM. Okay, and this is a part where our .NET framework or common modules of our .NET framework are loaded. Okay, so and there are some other applications like A1, A2, so on, and this is our .NET framework. Okay, so we are running our project P1 on this .NET framework. So actually what this .NET framework also does is it safeguards your application so that no other application interferes its execution or interferes and changes some of its code. So this is not possible. Okay, so it actually provides a safe environment for your project to actually execute. Okay, and there are some other features as well. We will get hold of these features in our upcoming lectures. Okay, so let's move on to next slide. Okay, so let's look at common architecture of our .NET framework. Okay, so on the top of the .NET framework, so we have different languages. Okay, so you might be seeing VB, C++, C Sharp, JavaScript, and so on. There are actually variety of languages, more than 90. I guess this .NET framework 2021 supports 90 plus languages. Okay, okay. So next level in this .NET framework is actually common language specification, which is known as CLS. Okay, so this CLS is actually the part which provides this interoperability to different languages. Okay, and how it provides interoperability, uh, I will give you an example right now. Okay, so consider you are using language C Sharp. Okay, and this side you are using language C++. Okay, you have declared a variable in C Sharp as integer a. Okay, and you have declared this variable in C++ as integer a. Okay, this might be here int 32a or int 64a or simply integer a. Okay, whatever you are writing. Okay, so actually you might be thinking, what is this int 32, 64 and simple int? So we will go deep into this when we will be studying data types. So simply you understand, int 32 is actually an integer of 32 bit long. Okay, so it will occupy memory of 32 bits, and similarly 64 will occupy memory of 64 bits into the memory. Okay, now what this CLS does, it actually defines the conversions of data types from one language to other language. Okay, so for example, you are building a project in C Sharp and you have to use some code from another project P2. Okay, which was actually built using C++. Okay, so what this CLS does is that it provides all the definitions of how to convert a data type from one language to another language. Okay, so if you think of it in this way, so whatever we want to do, okay, so or we can say whatever logic is there into your program, okay, so logic will remain same throughout your languages. Whatever program you are doing, whatever language you choose, logic will remain same, but the syntax of declaration and data types, size of your data types might differ depending upon whatever language you are using. Okay, so what this CLS does, it actually uh, gives definitions of how we can convert different data types from a language to another language. Okay, so this is actually your module which provides interoperability to your .NET framework. Okay, so let me delete some of this, so we might have space to write. Okay, so let's continue. So next level in .NET framework is your basic underground. What type of your background or what type of application you are developing? So one of that is Windows Forms. So in Windows Form applications, uh, we are developing applications. So this actually defines what type of applications you are developing. Windows Form application simple represents your application which you run on your normal Windows desktops. For example, your VLC player. Okay, normally you get an extension like .exe or .msi and so on. All these languages, all these applications are actually Windows Form applications. Okay, for example, your VLC, your Microsoft Office, that are run directly on your OS on top of your operating system. Okay, so now let's talk about this ASP.NET. So ASP.NET, actually full form of this ASP.NET is Active Server Pages.NET. Okay, so this ASP.NET is actually used to create, or you can say it is the language or platform for creating websites. Okay, so all the web-based apps are built using this ASP.NET. Okay, and this is ADO.NET. So ADO.NET is nothing but Active Database Object.NET. Okay, so this is actually used to create connectivity between your application and different databases which are available in the market. For example, your simply you can say Microsoft SQL Server, or you can say MySQL, SQLite, and so on. There are a variety of databases available in the today's market. Okay, so next is your base class library. So base class library is actually collection of all the classes present in your language. Okay, for example, considering you have studied C++. Okay, so whenever you want to actually create something, or you want to display something, we used to write cout, and we used to write whatever we want to display on the console. Okay, so this definition of this cout is actually defined in base class library for this C++ language. Okay, so similarly we have a base class library for all these languages that are supported for by your .NET framework. Okay, next is your common language runtime. Okay, so this common language runtime is actually responsible for providing your applications portability. Okay, so whatever you built on one computer system, you can run it on some other computer system. It is possible because of this common language runtime. Okay, so if some people out of you have studied this Java. Okay, so this CLR is actually analogous to your Java's virtual machine, which you used to call JVM. Okay, so this is similar to that JVM. So whatever you built using these languages will be converted into a common language part which is known as MSIL. We will talk about it in further slides, and this MSIL will be converted by CLR into your uh, you can say binary code that is understood by your operating system. Okay, so let's move on to next slide. Okay, so broadly speaking, this .NET framework is actually composed of three main entities. First of them is CLS, Common Language Specification. Second is your BCL, Base Class Library. And third is your CLR, Common Language Runtime. Okay, so as I have already told you, this CLS is actually responsible for communication between different languages. Okay, so you might be using C Sharp, C++ in your same project P1. Okay, so this CLS will be responsible for communication between these two languages. Okay, next is your base class library. Base class library is actually combination of all the functionalities that you can use within a language or within a project. Okay, and your CLR is actually an execution environment for your applications. Okay, so whatever you have built using your .NET framework, you can run it on top of your CLR. Okay, so let's move on to next slide. Okay, so this you can see whatever I have told you earlier. This is nothing but that. Okay, so let's move on to next slide. Okay, so let's talk about this base class library. Okay, as I have already told you, this base class library is actually combination of all the functionalities that you can use within a language. Okay, so simply you can see here base class library is composed of different namespaces. Okay, so now you might be thinking what a namespace is. We will talk about it in our coming lectures. Okay, so at this time what I can say is namespace in simple words is combination of different classes. Okay, so we have a system.web namespace, Windows form, drawing, XML, data, and so on. So this system.web namespace will have all the functionality related to your web-based apps. Similarly, data will have all the functionality related to how you can manipulate data on your applications and so on. Okay, so let's move on to next slide. Okay, so now let's talk about this common language runtime. Okay, so common language runtime provides a common runtime environment for all your .NET applications or all your .NET applications written in any of the language supported by your .NET framework. Okay, so this actually makes use of common type system CTS. We will talk about this in our upcoming lectures. Okay, and memory allocation and garbage collection, all this is looked after by your CLR. Okay, moreover the CLR converts your intermediate language to your native code. Okay, so now you might be thinking what this native code is and what this IL is. So this IL is actually intermediate language. To be more specific, this is actually MSIL, Microsoft Intermediate Language. So what this CLR does is it converts your MSIL code, intermediate language code, into native code which can be understood by your CPU, your host machine CPU, whatever machine you are using, so that it can understand that language, it can execute and give you results whatever you are expecting. Okay, and more than, even this number has grown more than 90 today. So more than 90 languages are supported by your .NET framework. Okay, some of them are written here, you can go through them. Okay, so let us see how this execution is done by your .NET framework. Okay, execution of code, how it is done by your .NET framework. Okay, so first of all, you will choose a language, whether it is VB, C Sharp, C++. Okay, so you can choose any of the language supported by your .NET framework. Okay, each language will have its own language specific compiler. Okay, so language specific compiler. So for example, let us consider we have a language L1. Okay, and you have written a program P1 in this language. Okay, so this language L1 will have its own compiler, let us call it C1. Okay, so what this compiler will do, it will take this source code or program P1 as input and convert it into an assembly intermediate language code. Okay, IL, or we can say it is MSIL, Microsoft Intermediate Language. Okay, and same is the process for any other language you might be using. For example, if you use some other language L2, it will have its own compiler C2. You will write program in this language L2, so let's call it P2. So this compiler P2 will take P2 as input or source code as input and convert this into again Microsoft Intermediate Language. Okay, next comes your CLR. Okay, CLR actually is common language runtime. Okay, and it contains your just-in-time compiler. Okay, what this CLR does is it takes your assembly input language code, or you can say intermediate language code, and converts it into your native code. Okay, so whatever intermediate language code you are using, doesn't matter which language you are using. Okay, whether your program is written in VB, C Sharp, C++, whatever language you are using, so your intermediate language code will be taken as input by your CLR and it will be converted into native code. Okay, and this native code is then fed to your operating system, and then operating system executes this code using your CPU. Okay, so this is whole your data flow, or you can say execution flow for your .NET framework. Okay, so let's move on to next slide. Okay, now let's go through this different versions of .NET framework. Okay, so first initially let's talk about this .NET framework 2.0. Okay, this .NET framework 2.0 actually had this CLR base class library, or you can also call it framework class library, and applications you can build on top of this .NET Framework 2.0 are Windows Form applications, ASP.NET applications, and ADO.NET applications. Okay, then in version 3.0, different new modules were added. So actually these were WPF, WCF, WF, and card space. So this is nothing but Windows Presentation Foundation, Communication Foundation, Workflow Foundation, and card space. Okay. Then in next version 3.5, link queue was added to your .NET framework. So this link queue is one of the most powerful tool of your, or you can say one of the most powerful module of your .NET framework. Okay, so we will study about this link queue in our upcoming lectures as well. Okay, so this is actually one of the most powerful tool uh, which I believe was developed in your .NET framework. Okay, then in version 4.0, this parallel link queue was added, task parallel library was added, and then in your version 4.5, your universal Windows platform was added and task-based in asynchronous model was added. Well, actually, yes, universal Windows platform apps were actually uh, developed in a way so that you can develop an application A1. Okay, this might be an application for your Windows form based application. Same code can be executed, or simply you can say same application can be embedded for your Android environment also, for your iOS environment also, okay, and for your Windows environment. So what this universal Windows platform did was that it created a common platform. So you might write code for a language, but in result you will get applications of all the different platforms. So for example, you are building a project P1. Okay, if you are using this UWP, same project can be for Windows Form applications. Correspondingly, you can get an iOS app also for this application and an Android app also for this application. Okay, so let's move on to next slide. Now let's talk about this IDE, integrated development environment, whatever we will be using to develop our applications. Okay, so we will be using Visual Studio as well as we will be using Visual Studio Code. Okay, so code is nothing but a simple lightweight editor, and it is capable of creating your console based applications without needing to install this whole Visual Studio .NET framework. Okay, so this Visual Studio ID will actually be of the order of 10 to 40 GB depending upon whatever modules you are deciding to install. Okay, and on the other hand, this Visual Studio Code will be of the order of maximum 200 MBs. Okay, so we will be using both this Visual Studio IDE as well as this Visual Studio Code in our upcoming lectures to demonstrate different programs of your C# language. Okay, so this whole course will be actually on your C# language. So today we actually gave a brief introduction about your .NET framework. Okay, so let's meet in next lecture. Till then, goodbye.